Hi, this is Nathan Childers. This lesson is called Altissimo Speed Fingerings. Specifically, I'm going to show you some fingerings from the first altissimo note, G, up to my high D, or altissimo D. So we're in my key of G, the notes G, A, B, C, and D. And I will show you the fingerings as well. So let me give you an example. So the fingerings I use to play those lines, I have stripped down to the bare minimum. I've tried to take away any unnecessary fingers and add to that my throat. So certain notes that become a little unstable, I try to stabilize them with my throat. So let's start with the first note, G. I'm going to give you two options. The first option is the most stripped down version, and perhaps the quickest, but the most unstable. And it is octave key and your front key, and you're going to get this G. You noticed my throat was very well expanded to adjust for that G. To stabilize the G, I recommend this: octave key, front key, in your right hand, first key here, and the low side key, or versions of these two here you can experiment with. And it will stabilize the note and change the pitch slightly. I use those two as one of my speed options for G. Moving on to A, I'm going to give you two options for A as well. Octave key, 2 and 3 in your left hand, and then 1, 2, and 3 in your right hand for A. To strip it down to the bare minimum, I recommend this fingering: octave key, 2 and 3 only, and leave these alone. Moving on to B, I only use one fingering for B, and it is octave key and side D. I've been using it for years and it works great for me. Moving on to C, I use only one fingering for this, and it is octave key, side D, side E flat for C. And lastly, D. I use octave key, side D, side E flat, side F, and then in this hand, I add the top side key for D. When you put it together, you've got speed fingerings for altissimo. I should mention that in conjunction with your altissimo studies, make sure you're spending a considerable amount of time with long tones and overtones as you're working out your altissimo fingerings and your throat control. Once you've got your speed fingerings in place, you can start to incorporate them with your major scales slowly. I recommend doing this, tonguing the notes first and taking your time to get each note out. For example, back to our original scale, our G major, if we take our finger G in the upper register and go up into the altissimo speed fingerings, we can slowly put it together. With time, you'll be able to do your major scales, minor scales, and your intervals using these speed fingerings. Here's an example of some scales. I tongue those scales. The next step would be to do them legato. If you find that you're having a hard time getting these notes to speak in the altissimo range, specifically the fingerings I've showed you, it could be one of two things. Your reed could be the wrong strength, either too hard or too soft. As a guidepost, for example, take the high B I showed you. If you're able to get up into the G and A range, but for some reason once you get to B, the note is cutting out on you, I would really recommend trying some other reeds. but even more importantly, I would recommend practicing in front of a mirror and watching your throat. It very likely is that your throat is not expanding enough to adjust to the higher range of the instrument that I've showed you. So, as a result, look in the mirror carefully at your throat to see if it is expanding properly up into that higher range. And I also recommend buying 3 boxes of reeds of different strength. One in the middle, for example, a 3 and a 3.5, and then perhaps a 2.5, or whatever suits your purposes. By experimenting with those 3 strengths, you're going to find the right strength for you to get a good range with your instrument, whether it be the low range, but specifically the Altissimo, you're going to need a slightly harder reed.